Story 1. The Phantom Convoy. Marcus Chen had been driving rigs for 17 years, hauling freight across the American Southwest with the kind of quiet confidence that only comes from logging over 2 million miles without incident. He knew every truck stop between Albuquerque and Phoenix, every way station, every stretch of road where the highway patrol liked to hide. On the night of March 14, 2019, he was running a standard route along Interstate 40 through the Arizona desert, pulling a load of industrial machinery bound for Flagstaff. The night was clear, temperature hovering around 58 degrees, with a half-moon casting pale light across the endless expanse of scrubland. Marcus had his CB radio tuned to Channel 19, listening to the occasional chatter from other drivers. His fuel gauge showed 3/4 full. His GPS indicated smooth sailing for the next 140 miles, and he had a thermos of black coffee wedged into the cup holder. Everything was routine, exactly as it should be. Around 2:47 a.m., somewhere between Hallbrook and Winslow, Marcus noticed headlights in his side mirror. Another semi was approaching from behind, moving considerably faster than the 65 miles per hour Marcus was maintaining. Within a few minutes, the truck pulled alongside him in the passing lane. Marcus glanced over out of habit, the way truckers do, expecting maybe a friendly wave or nod. The cab was dark, not just unlit but completely black, as if the windows had been painted over or covered from the inside. No dashboard glow, no interior lights, nothing. The truck itself looked older, maybe from the 70s or 80s, with a rounded hood and chrome that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Marcus couldn't make out any company logos or identification numbers. The Phantom truck stayed parallel to him for nearly 3 miles, matching his speed exactly. Marcus tried adjusting his speed, slowing down to 60, then speeding up to 70. The other truck matched him perfectly, maintaining the exact same distance. He reached for his CB radio and keyed the mic. "Breaker 19, this is Desert Dog. Got a truck running alongside me near mile marker 257 with no lights in the cab. Driver, you having electrical problems. Come back. Static." Then more static. Marcus tried again, cycling through different channels. Nothing but empty air and the faint crackle of distant interference. That's when he noticed something that made his stomach drop. There were more trucks behind him now. He could see them in his mirrors, 4 or 5 big rigs, all maintaining the exact same distance from each other, all running with their headlights on but no visible drivers. They formed a perfect convoy, moving in synchronization that was mathematically precise, inhuman. Marcus felt his heart rate accelerate. He'd heard stories, of course. Every trucker had. Tales of ghost trucks and phantom vehicles, usually dismissed as highway fatigue or the product of too many hours behind the wheel. But this was different. This was real, happening right now, and he was completely surrounded. The truck beside him suddenly accelerated, pulling ahead. Marcus watched as it moved forward about 50 yards, then abruptly veered into his lane, not cutting him off exactly but positioning itself directly in front of him. The other trucks behind closed ranks, boxing him in. He was trapped in a moving cage of steel and darkness, traveling at highway speed through the desert night. Marcus tried his cell phone. No signal. The GPS screen flickered, then went completely black. When it came back on, it showed his location as somewhere in the middle of the desert, miles from any road. The radio was still dead, producing nothing but a low hum that seemed to vibrate through his entire cab. For 23 minutes, they drove like this. Marcus counted every second, his hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, sweat soaking through his shirt despite the air conditioning. The trucks maintained their formation with mechanical precision, never varying speed, never breaking pattern. He tried honking his horn. The sound seemed muffled, absorbed by something he couldn't see or understand. Then, without warning, the truck in front of him lit up. Not the headlights or running lights, but the entire trailer began to glow from within, a sick greenish-yellow light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Marcus could see shapes moving inside, shadows that didn't correspond to any cargo he could imagine. They writhed and twisted, pressing against the trailer walls from the inside, creating bulges in the metal that should have been impossible. The CB radio exploded to life, but it wasn't broadcasting voices. It was screaming. Dozens, maybe hundreds of voices, all screaming in unison. A sound so terrible that Marcus ripped the radio unit from its mounting and threw it on the passenger floor. But the screaming continued, coming from everywhere now, vibrating through the frame of his truck, resonating in his bones. One of the shadows inside the glowing trailer pressed against the back door, and Marcus saw with absolute clarity that it had a face. Not human, but aware. It looked directly at him through two trailers, through metal and space and reality itself, and he felt something break inside his mind. Some protective barrier that kept people sane, that allowed them to function in a rational world. The convoy reached mile marker 289. Marcus knew this because his GPS suddenly flashed back on, showing the correct location. In perfect synchronization, every single Phantom truck simultaneously veered to the right, crossing into the shoulder, then disappearing. Not driving off into the desert, not parking, but simply ceasing to exist. One moment they were there, the next they were gone, as if they'd been edited out of reality itself. Marcus's radio returned to normal function. The CB sparked and sputtered, then resumed its usual Channel 19 chatter. A driver named Billy Ray was complaining about construction delays near Gallup. Another driver was asking about good truck stops with hot showers. Normal, mundane, real. Marcus pulled into the next truck stop, his entire body shaking so badly he could barely operate the air brakes. He sat in the parking lot for 3 hours, drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes, even though he'd quit 5 years earlier. Other truckers came and went. None of them had seen anything unusual. None of them had experienced the convoy. He filed no report. Who would believe it? Instead, he went to a mechanic and had every single electronic system in his truck examined. Everything was functioning perfectly. No malfunctions, no glitches, no explanation. Marcus still drives, still runs the same routes. But he refuses to travel through that section of Interstate 40 between 2:00 and 4:00 a.m. He'll pull over, sleep in his cab, wait for sunrise. Other drivers have noticed, asked him about it. He tells them he likes to avoid the late-night dead zone, that the coffee is better at dawn truck stops. But sometimes, when he's driving in the dark on other highways, he sees them in his peripheral vision. Trucks that shouldn't be there, formation, drivers that don't exist. He never looks directly at them. He's learned that lesson. As long as he doesn't acknowledge them, doesn't make eye contact with whatever might be looking back, they leave him alone. Mostly. Story 2. The breathing cargo. Jennifer Walsh had been a long-haul trucker for 12 years, specializing in refrigerated transport across the northern United States and Canada. On November 8, 2020, she picked up what should have been a routine load from a meat processing facility outside of Grand Forks, North Dakota. The manifest listed the cargo as beef products, 40,000 pounds of cuts and ground meat destined for distribution centers in Minneapolis. The temperature in the reefer unit was set to maintain 34 degrees Fahrenheit, standard protocol for fresh meat transport. Jennifer performed her pre-trip inspection with her usual thoroughness. She checked the reefer unit, verified the seals on the trailer doors, confirmed the temperature readouts, and examined the paperwork. Everything was in order. The facility foreman, a man named Doug Peterson with tired eyes and a coffee-stained jacket, handed her the sealed manifest and barely made eye contact. He seemed eager for her to leave, kept checking his watch, glancing back at the processing plant behind him. "Just get it to Minneapolis by noon tomorrow," he said. "Don't stop unless you absolutely have to. Temperature's critical on this one." Jennifer thought the comment was odd. Temperature was always critical with refrigerated loads, but Doug said it like he was warning her about something. She dismissed the feeling, climbed into her cab, and pulled out onto Highway 2 heading south. The first 3 hours were uneventful. Light snow had started falling, nothing serious, just enough to require intermittent wipers. The road was clear, traffic was light, and Jennifer settled into the rhythm of the drive. She had an audiobook playing, some thriller about a detective in Boston, and a bag of sunflower seeds to keep her alert. Around 11:30 p.m., approximately 90 miles from Grand Forks, she heard the first sound. It came through the cab, a low vibration that she initially attributed to road noise or maybe an issue with the trailer's suspension. But it continued, steady and rhythmic, almost like breathing. Deep, slow inhalations and exhalations that seemed to pulse through the entire truck. Jennifer checked her mirrors, wondering if maybe she had a tire issue or something loose in the trailer coupling. Everything looked normal. The sound continued, growing louder. She turned off the audiobook to listen more carefully. There was no question now. Something was breathing in the trailer. The rhythm was too regular, too organic to be mechanical. Each breath seemed to last about 8 seconds, in and out, like some massive creature sleeping just behind the thin metal wall that separated the cab from the cargo area. She grabbed her CB radio. "Breaker 19, this is Frosty Lady. Anyone else running refrigerated loads out of Grand Forks tonight? Got a question about reefer unit sounds. Come back." A driver named Tom responded. "This is Highway Tom, Frosty Lady. What kind of sounds are you hearing?" Jennifer hesitated. How could she describe it without sounding insane? Like rhythmic vibration, almost sounds like breathing. You ever heard anything like that from a reefer unit? "Compressor cycles can make weird noises," Tom said. "Could be your coolant system. Might want to pull over and check it out." Jennifer saw a rest area sign indicating a stop in 12 miles. She decided to investigate there, even though the thought of opening the trailer filled her with inexplicable dread. The breathing continued, steady and hypnotic, and she realized something else. It was getting warmer in the cab. She checked the temperature gauge. 78 degrees when she'd had it set to 65. She adjusted the control. The temperature didn't change. In fact, it started climbing. 80 degrees, 85. The heating system wasn't even running, but the cab felt like a sauna. Jennifer cracked her window, letting in the November cold. The icy air provided momentary relief, but did nothing to lower the internal temperature. The breathing grew louder, more insistent. Now she could feel it vibrating through her seat, through the steering wheel, as if the entire truck had become a living organism and she was trapped inside its body. Her hands were slick with sweat. The windshield started fogging up from the inside despite the cold air flowing through the open window. Jennifer reached the rest area and pulled in, parking away from the few other vehicles scattered across the lot. It was 12:17 a.m. The snow had stopped, leaving everything covered in a thin white blanket that looked gray under the sodium lights. She grabbed her flashlight, pulled on her jacket, and walked around to the back of the trailer. The breathing was clearly audible now, emanating from inside the sealed container. Jennifer approached the doors slowly, her flashlight beam trembling slightly. The locks were still intact, the seals unbroken. Everything looked exactly as it had when she'd left Grand Forks. She pressed her ear against the cold metal door. The sound was unmistakable. Something inside was breathing, and it was massive. Each inhalation seemed to draw in impossible volumes of air, each exhalation released with a wet, rattling quality that made her think of diseased lungs or something aquatic. Jennifer checked the reefer unit temperature display. It read 68 degrees and climbing. The unit should have been maintaining 34 degrees. She tried resetting it, cycling the power. Nothing changed. The temperature continued to rise and the breathing grew faster, more excited, as if whatever was inside knew she was out here, was responding to her presence. Her phone showed 12:31 a.m. She called the number on her manifest, the facility in Grand Forks. It rang 7 times, then went to a generic voicemail. She tried again. Same result. She called the delivery facility in Minneapolis. No answer, just an automated message saying the office would open at 8:00 a.m. The breathing suddenly stopped. Complete silence. No compressor hum, no engine idle, nothing. Jennifer stood in that silence for what felt like an eternity, her heart hammering in her chest. Then something hit the inside of the trailer door with tremendous force, creating a dent in the metal inches from her face. She stumbled backward, falling in the snow. Another impact, then another. Something was throwing itself against the doors from the inside, trying to get out. The metal groaned and buckled. The seals held, but barely. Whatever was inside was unbelievably strong and becoming more frenzied with each impact. Jennifer ran back to her cab, her boots slipping on the icy pavement. She could hear other impacts now, against the sides of the trailer, the roof, as if whatever was inside had multiplied or was striking from multiple angles simultaneously. Other people in the rest area were starting to notice. She saw a man in an SUV staring at her trailer, his face pressed against his window. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911. The operator answered, and Jennifer tried to explain the situation, but even to her own ears, it sounded insane. "There's something alive in my refrigerated trailer. It's trying to break out. I need help." "Ma'am, what kind of cargo are you carrying?" "The manifest says beef products, but there's something else. Something alive. Please, you need to send someone." While she was on the phone, the impact stopped again. Silence returned, but this time it felt predatory, watchful. The temperature in the cab had dropped back to normal. The reefer unit display now showed 34 degrees, exactly where it should be. "Ma'am, are you still there? Ma'am?" Jennifer ended the call. Cab, staring at the trailer in her mirrors, waiting for something to happen. Minutes passed, then an hour, nothing. The trailer sat motionless, the reefer unit humming normally, the temperature steady. At 3:45 a.m., a North Dakota state trooper pulled into the rest area, responding to her 911 call. Jennifer explained everything, expecting skepticism or dismissal. Instead, the trooper looked at her trailer with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not surprise, more like recognition. "Did they tell you where the meat came from?" he asked quietly. "Just said a processing facility in Grand Forks." "Why?" The trooper was silent for a moment, his hand resting on his service weapon. "We've had 3 calls like this in the past 2 months. Drivers carrying loads from that facility, all reporting the same things. Breathing sounds, temperature fluctuations, something trying to break out. One driver abandoned his entire truck at a rest stop in Wisconsin. Never came back for it." "What was in the trailers?" Jennifer asked, though part of her didn't want to know. "By the time we opened them, just meat. But the metal inside," he paused. "It had scratches, deep ones like something with claws had been trying to get out. But the seals were never broken. Nothing could have gotten in or out." The trooper offered to follow her to Minneapolis to be present when the trailer was opened. Jennifer accepted. They drove in convoy through the rest of the night, the trooper's patrol car following at a steady distance. The breathing never returned, but Jennifer could feel something watching her from inside that trailer. A presence, an awareness. They reached the Minneapolis distribution center at 11:42 a.m. The facility manager, a woman named Sandra Velasquez, seemed unsurprised by the police presence. She directed them to a loading dock away from the main building, away from other workers. When they broke the seals and opened the doors, they found exactly what the manifest promised. Beef products, properly packaged, correctly labeled, at the right temperature. Everything was completely normal, except for the inside of the trailer. The metal walls were covered in condensation that shouldn't have been there given the temperature control. And in that condensation, someone or something had traced patterns. Symbols that Jennifer didn't recognize, spirals and angular shapes that hurt to look at directly. They covered every surface, drawn by what could only have been fingers or something similar. Sandra took photos, then had the trailer pressure washed before anyone else could see. She paid Jennifer in full, gave her a bonus for the trouble, and made her sign a non-disclosure agreement. The state trooper received a call on his radio and left without explanation. Jennifer never hauled refrigerated loads again. She switched to dry goods, furniture, anything that couldn't be alive. But sometimes, late at night when she's driving through empty stretches of highway, she feels that warmth creeping back into her cab. She hears that breathing, distant but getting closer. And she drives faster, always keeping her windows cracked, always watching her temperature gauge, always wondering what she really carried from Grand Forks that November night. Story 3. The Missing Mile. Robert Bobby Thornton had been driving trucks for 23 years when he encountered the missing mile on Interstate 80 through Nevada. It was July 19, 2018, a scorching summer night with temperatures still hovering in the 90s even after sunset. Bobby was hauling electronics from Sacramento to Salt Lake City, making good time across the barren landscape east of Reno. The highway stretched ahead in a perfectly straight line, the way it does through that part of Nevada, where the road builders didn't have to account for much beyond the occasional mountain range. Bobby had driven this route hundreds of times, knew every truck stop, every way station, every speed trap. He could practically drive it blindfolded. At 10:47 p.m., according to his dashboard clock, Bobby passed mile marker 214. He was listening to a country music station out of Elko, finishing the last of a gas station sandwich, and thinking about the hotel bed waiting for him in Salt Lake. Completely routine, completely normal. He checked his GPS. It showed him approaching mile marker 215. His speedometer indicated 68 miles per hour, steady and consistent. The road ahead was empty, just dark asphalt and reflective markers stretching into the distance. Bobby glanced down to adjust his radio. When he looked up, he should have been at or near mile marker 215. Instead, the sign rushing past his window read mile marker 216. He blinked, confused. Had he missed 215? It wasn't possible. These markers were precisely spaced, exactly 1 mile apart. At 68 miles per hour, he would have needed about 53 seconds to cover that distance. He looked down for maybe 5 seconds, tops. Bobby checked his GPS again. It now showed him just past mile marker 216, coordinates and all data confirming the location. But something felt wrong. Not just the missing marker, but deeper. The air in his cab felt different, thicker somehow, like the atmospheric pressure had changed. His ears popped the way they did at high altitude, even though this stretch of I-80 was relatively flat. He reached for his CB radio to see if any other drivers had noticed anything odd. The radio was on, volume up, but it was completely silent. Not static, not distant voices, just absolute silence as if the thing had been disconnected. Bobby checked the power. The unit was on, the channel indicator showing 19 but producing no sound whatsoever. That's when he noticed the moon. When he'd passed mile marker 214, the moon had been on his right side, a waning gibbous about 3/4 full. Now it was directly ahead of him and it was full. Completely, impossibly full. Bobby had grown up in rural Montana, had spent countless nights under open sky. He knew the moon's phases, knew them as well as he knew his own reflection. The moon didn't go from 3/4 to full in less than a minute. His phone showed 10:48 p.m. Only 1 minute had passed since mile marker 214. 60 seconds. But he'd covered 2 miles and the moon had changed phases. Bobby felt a cold weight settling in his stomach, the kind of primal fear that bypasses rational thought and goes straight to instinct. The road ahead looked the same, yet different. The asphalt was the same color, the lane markers were identical, but the quality of the darkness had changed. It felt older somehow, heavier. The stars above were wrong too. Bobby couldn't articulate exactly how, but the constellations were shifted, arrangements he'd known his entire life now slightly off, as if someone had edited the sky and hoped no one would notice. Mile marker 217 appeared, then 218, then 219. Bobby was covering miles too quickly, far faster than his speedometer indicated. He checked it again. Still 68 miles per hour, but the markers were flashing past every 30 seconds or so. The mathematics didn't work. Unless time itself had broken, he was traveling at impossible speed while his instruments showed normal velocity. He tried his phone. No signal. Not even searching for service, just a blank emptiness where the signal indicator should be. He tried calling 911 anyway. The phone appeared to connect, showed a call in progress, but no sound came through. No ringing, no operator, nothing. Mile marker 220 appeared, and Bobby realized with mounting horror that he couldn't remember what the landscape between 214 and 220. He'd been staring at the road the entire time, but his memory of the past few minutes was fragmentary, dreamlike. He remembered looking down at his radio. He remembered looking up and seeing 216. Everything between was missing, edited out of his experience like frames cut from a film. At mile marker 222, Bobby saw the truck stop. Not one he recognized, even though he knew every stop along this route. This one looked old, vintage, like something from the 1960s or 70s. A single fuel pump stood under flickering fluorescent lights. A small building with darkened windows sat behind it, and parked near the building was another semi-truck, an ancient model with rounded fenders and a cab style that hadn't been manufactured in decades. Bobby's truck began to slow down. He wasn't touching the brake pedal, but the engine was decelerating, pulling toward the truck stop as if drawn by magnetic force. He pressed the accelerator. Nothing happened. The truck continued slowing, steering wheel turning slightly on its own, guiding him toward the exit ramp that led to the mysterious truck stop. Panic flooded through him. Bobby grabbed the wheel with both hands, fighting against the invisible force pulling him off the highway. His muscles strained, tendons standing out on his forearms, but the wheel moved smoothly against his grip, turning the truck inexorably toward the exit. Then he saw the driver. A figure stood next to the antique semi-truck, visible in the flickering light. Tall, impossibly tall, wearing what looked like a trucker's jacket and jeans. But the proportions were wrong. The arms too long, hanging past the knees. The head slightly too large, tilted at an angle that should have been uncomfortable. The figure raised one elongated arm and waved. Not a friendly greeting, but a summoning gesture. Come here. Join us. Bobby did the only thing he could think of. He reached down and turned off his headlights, plunging everything into darkness. Then he closed his eyes. Completely, tightly shut, the way a child closes their eyes to make monsters disappear. He counted to 10 in his head, hands still gripping the wheel though he'd stopped fighting its movement. His truck continued rolling forward, engine silent now, only the sound of tires on pavement confirming he was still in motion. When he reached 10, Bobby felt a sudden lurch like dropping in an elevator. His stomach flipped. The temperature in the cab spiked, then dropped back to normal. His ears popped again. He opened his eyes. Mile marker 215 was passing on his right. His GPS showed the correct location. The moon was back in its proper position, 3/4 full on his right side. His CB radio erupted with chatter, drivers discussing weather and road conditions. His phone showed full signal, the time reading 10:48 p.m. Bobby looked in his mirrors, expecting to see the mysterious truck stop, the tall figure, something. But there was only darkness and empty highway. He pressed his accelerator cautiously. The truck responded normally, engine surging, speedometer climbing back to 68 miles per hour. Mile marker 216 appeared exactly when it should have, about 53 seconds after 215. Then 217, then 218. Normal spacing, normal time, normal everything. As if the previous experience had never happened. But Bobby's dashboard clock now read 11, 8:03 p.m. 15 minutes had vanished. And when he checked his fuel gauge, it showed 3/4 full, even though it had been nearly full when he passed marker 214. He'd burned through a quarter tank of diesel, roughly 50 miles worth of fuel, to cover what should have been 1 mile of highway. Bobby drove straight through to Salt Lake City without stopping, even though his company regulations required rest breaks. He delivered his load, filed his paperwork, and immediately drove back to California via a different route, taking Interstate 15 through Las Vegas despite the added miles. He never told anyone what happened. Not his dispatcher, not his wife, not his fellow drivers. But he studied maps obsessively after that night, researching the history of Interstate 80 through Nevada. He learned that the highway was built in sections during the 1960s, replacing older routes that dated back to the original Transcontinental Railroad. Some of those older routes had strange histories, disappearances, accidents that couldn't be explained, sections of road where travelers reported lost time and impossible experiences. Bobby still drives trucks, but he won't run I-80 through Nevada anymore. He tells his dispatcher he's got family reasons for avoiding that route, personal issues he doesn't want to discuss. The company accommodates him. They've learned that when experienced drivers develop route aversions, it's better not to ask questions. Sometimes Bobby wakes up from nightmares where he's back on that road, approaching mile marker 214, knowing what's about to happen but unable to stop it. In these dreams, he can't close his eyes fast enough. He pulls into that vintage truck stop, parks next to the ancient semi, and the impossibly tall figure walks toward his cab. It reaches up with those two long arms and taps on his window. And when Bobby looks at where its face should be, he sees himself. Not as he is now, but as he might be after years of driving that missing mile, covering the same impossible distance again and again, trapped between 214 and 215 forever, waving at other drivers, trying to summon them into his eternal route. He always wakes before the dream version of himself opens the door. Story 4. The Echo Driver. Patricia Dawson was a 41-year-old trucker specializing in hazmat transport, certified to carry Class 3 flammable liquids across the southeastern United States. On April 3, 2021, she was hauling 8,000 gallons of industrial solvent from a chemical plant in Louisiana to a manufacturing facility in Tennessee. The route took her north on Interstate 55. Then east on Interstate 40, a 14-hour drive she'd completed at least 50 times. Patricia left Baton Rouge at 6:15 p.m., planning to drive through the night and deliver by 8:00 a.m. the following morning. The weather was clear, traffic was light, and her truck was running perfectly. She just had the vehicle serviced 3 days earlier. Everything checked out. Everything was routine. Around 11:30 p.m., Patricia was approaching the Mississippi-Tennessee border on Interstate 40. The highway was nearly empty, just a few cars scattered across the multiple lanes. She was listening to a podcast about true crime, something about a serial killer in the Pacific Northwest, when she noticed headlights behind her. Another semi-truck had appeared in her mirrors, maybe a quarter-mile back, closing distance. Patricia didn't think much of it initially. Trucks passed each other all the time. But as the vehicle got closer, something about it seemed familiar. The configuration of the running lights, the shape of the cab, the color and style of the trailer. It looked exactly like her truck. Patricia dismissed the thought as fatigue playing tricks on her mind. Lots of trucks looked similar, especially at night. She focused on the road, letting the other vehicle approach. Within a few minutes, it was directly behind her, maybe 50 feet back, matching her speed exactly. She adjusted her mirror to get a better look. The truck was identical to hers in every detail. Same make and model cab, same trailer configuration, same hazmat placards. Even the same company logo on the door. Patricia felt a chill run down her spine. Her company operated dozens of trucks, but they didn't usually run this route, and she didn't know of any other drivers who'd be in this exact location tonight. The truck behind her flashed its high beams once, twice, 3 times. A signal. Patricia wasn't sure what it meant, but trucker etiquette suggested she should respond. She flashed her own lights in acknowledgement. That's when her CB radio crackled to life. A woman's voice came through, distorted with static but understandable. "Unit ahead, this is Patricia Dawson running hazmat tanker. You're blocking my route. I need to pass." Patricia's hands went numb on the steering wheel. That was her voice. Not similar, not kind of like hers, but exactly her voice, with the same inflection, the same Louisiana accent she tried to soften but could never quite eliminate. She grabbed her CB microphone with a trembling hand. "This is Patricia Dawson. I don't know who you are or what kind of joke this is, but it's not funny. Identify yourself properly." Static. Then her own voice again. "Already told you, Patricia Dawson, hazmat certified, running 8,000 gallons of industrial solvent from Baton Rouge to Tennessee. Been driving this route for years. Now move over and let me pass." Patricia's mind raced through possibilities. Mistaken identity. Someone with a similar voice, some kind of prank. But none of those explained how this person knew her exact cargo, her exact route, her exact details. She looked in her mirror again. The truck behind her was still there, still exactly 50 feet back, matching her speed with precision. She could see the driver now, barely visible in the dim light of the cab. A woman, wearing the same jacket Patricia was wearing, the same baseball cap, the same everything. Patricia slowed down, dropping from 65 to 55 miles per hour. Truck behind her slowed identically, maintaining the exact same distance. She sped up to 70, the truck behind her matched perfectly. She tried to see the license plate, but it was obscured by shadows and distance. Her phone rang. Patricia jumped at the sound, nearly swerving. She looked at the screen. The caller ID showed her own name, her own number. She stared at it for a moment, then answered. "Hello. Why aren't you letting me pass?" The voice was hers, frustrated and tired. "I'm running late. I've got a delivery at 8:00 a.m. I need to get by you." Patricia's throat tight. "I have the same delivery, same time, same cargo. What the hell is happening?" "Nothing's happening. I'm just trying to do my job, same as every night. Now please move over. I've been stuck behind you for the past hour. You've only been there for maybe 10 minutes. A pause on the other end. Then, "What are you talking about? I've been following you since Memphis. You got on at the junction with Interstate 55 and you've been blocking the passing lane ever since." Patricia hadn't been in Memphis. She'd come up I-55 from Louisiana, hadn't reached Memphis yet. She was at least 2 hours south of there. She tried to explain this, but the voice on the phone kept insisting, growing more agitated, more frustrated. "I don't have time for this," the voice said. "I'm passing you." The truck behind her suddenly accelerated, pulling into the left lane. Patricia watched in her mirror as it drew alongside her cab. She turned to look directly at the other driver. It was her. Not someone who looked like her, not a twin or a doppelganger, but her. Same face, same eyes, same scar on her left cheek from a childhood bicycle accident. The other Patricia looked back at her with an expression of confusion and growing horror that must have mirrored Patricia's own. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, they drove parallel. 2 identical trucks, 2 identical drivers occupying the same stretch of highway at the same moment. Patricia could see her own mouth moving in the other cab, forming words she couldn't hear. She saw her own hand reaching for the CB microphone. Then the other truck started to fade. Not driving away, not disappearing suddenly, but becoming translucent, ghostly. Patricia could see through the cab, through the trailer, could see the empty highway beyond it. The truck became transparent, then barely visible, then gone completely. But the CB radio was still transmitting. "Not possible. You can't be here. I'm here. I'm the one driving this route. You can't be real. You can't be." The transmission cut off mid-sentence, replaced by normal static and distant chatter from other drivers on different channels. Patricia pulled onto the shoulder, her entire body shaking. She sat there for 20 minutes, hazard lights flashing, trying to process what she just experienced. Her logical mind insisted it was hallucination, fatigue, some kind of neurological event. But her phone's call log showed an incoming call from her own number at 11:47 p.m., duration 4 minutes and 23 seconds. She called her supervisor, a man named Gary Mitchell who'd been with the company for 30 years. She told him everything, expecting disbelief or concern for her mental state. Instead, Gary was silent for a long moment. "Where are you exactly?" he finally asked. Patricia checked her GPS and told him, "Okay, listen carefully. Do not under any circumstances stop driving, do not pull over again. Get to Tennessee as fast as you can, deliver your load, and come straight back to the office. We need to talk in person." "Gary, what's going on?" "Just drive, please." "I'll explain when you get back." Patricia followed his instructions, driving straight through to Tennessee despite her shaking hands and racing heart. She delivered the load at 7:52 a.m., 8 minutes early. The receiving facility staff noticed nothing unusual. The cargo was exactly as specified. The seals were intact. Everything was normal. She drove back to Louisiana and went directly to Gary's office. He closed the door, made sure they were alone, then pulled out a file folder from his desk drawer. Inside were incident reports, dozens of them dating back over 15 years. "We've had 43 reported encounters like yours," Gary said quietly. "All on the same stretch of Interstate 40 between Mississippi and Tennessee. Drivers seeing doubles of themselves, receiving calls from their own numbers, having conversations with trucks that match their own. Sometimes the double is ahead of them, sometimes behind. Always on night shifts, always running hazmat." "What is it?" Patricia asked. "What's causing it?" Gary shook his head. "We don't know. We've had investigators look into it, paranormal researchers, even brought in a psychologist who specializes in highway hallucinations. Nobody can explain it. The going theory is some kind of temporal overlap, like two versions of the same timeline bleeding into each other. Maybe there's a version of you that took a different route, left at a different time, and somehow you both ended up occupying the same space for a few minutes. That's not possible. I know, but we've had drivers quit over this. Good drivers, experienced people who don't scare easily. A few have had mental breakdowns. One guy, Terrence Williams, he saw his double and tried to ram it off the road. Ended up crashing his truck into a barrier. Claimed his double was trying to steal his life, take his place. Gary showed Patricia counseling resources, offered her time off, suggested she might want to consider running different routes. But he also made her sign a non-disclosure agreement, standard company policy for what they called anomalous incidents. Patricia took 2 weeks off, then went back to work. But she requested daytime shifts only, and she avoided Interstate 40 entirely, taking longer routes that added hours to her trips. The company accommodated her without question. She never saw her double again, but she thinks about it constantly. Questions that have answers circle through her mind during every drive. If that was her from another timeline or another version of reality, what happened to that version? Did that Patricia make it to Tennessee? Is she still out there, driving the same routes, having the same experience? And the worst question, the one that keeps Patricia awake at night. What if the other version was the real one, and she's the echo? What if she's the ghost truck that appears behind other drivers, calling them on the phone, insisting she has the right to pass? What if she died in some accident years ago and doesn't know it, trapped in an eternal loop of the same delivery, forever approaching Tennessee, forever encountering versions of herself that haven't yet realized they're already gone? She has no way to prove she's real. No way to confirm that her life is the genuine one and not an endless repetition of a single night. All she can do is keep driving, keep delivering, keep existing in whatever version of reality she occupies, and hope that the next time she looks in her mirror, she only sees the road behind her. Story 5. The Vanishing Highway. Dennis Kowalski had been a truck driver for 19 years, primarily running routes through the Pacific Northwest. On September 21, 2019, he was hauling a load of lumber from a mill in Oregon to a construction company in Spokane, Washington. The route took him through some of the most beautiful country in America, forests and mountains and rivers, scenery Dennis had learned to appreciate during his 2 decades on the road. He departed from Eugene, Oregon at 3:00 p.m., planning to reach Spokane by the following morning. The weather forecast predicted clear skies and mild temperatures, perfect driving conditions. Dennis had made this trip countless times, knew every curve and grade, every scenic pullout and rest area. The first 4 hours were exactly as expected. Dennis drove north on Interstate 5, then merged onto Highway 26 heading east through the Cascade Range. The sun set around 7:15 p.m., painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that made the mountain peaks look like they were glowing. Dennis stopped at a truck stop near Government Camp, filled his fuel tank, grabbed coffee and a sandwich, and was back on the road by 7:45 p.m. Highway 26 wound through the mountains, a well-maintained 2-lane road that climbed steadily toward higher elevations. Dennis knew this section well, had driven it in snow and rain and fog. Tonight, with clear weather and light traffic, it should have been easy. Around 8:30 p.m., Dennis noticed that he hadn't seen any other vehicles for at least 15 minutes. Not unusual on this stretch, but typically he'd encounter a few cars or maybe another truck. Tonight, the highway was completely empty. His headlights carved through the darkness, illuminating nothing but asphalt and the dense forest on either side. His GPS showed him approaching a section of highway where there should have been a scenic viewpoint on the right side, a small parking area where tourists sometimes stop to take photos of Mount Hood. Dennis had pulled into that viewpoint dozens of times. He knew exactly where it was, could probably find it blindfolded. He passed where it should have been. Nothing, just unbroken forest, trees pressing close to the road. Dennis frowned. Maybe he'd misremembered the location. He drove on, watching for landmarks. There should have been a bridge coming up, crossing a small creek. The bridge had distinctive green railings painted by the Forestry Service years ago. Dennis had a clear memory of those railings, had seen them hundreds of times. No bridge. The road continued straight, no creek, no green railings, no change in elevation. Now Dennis was paying close attention. Something was wrong. The highway looked the same, felt the same, but the landmarks he knew as well as his own living room were missing. He checked his GPS. It showed him exactly where he should be, the route displayed with his truck's position marked by a blue dot. But the GPS map and the actual road were diverging. According to the GPS, he should have been approaching a sharp left turn, a hairpin curve around a steep drop-off. Dennis knew that curve, had navigated it cautiously every single trip. He watched the GPS count down the distance. 200 yards, 150. The road ahead was straight, no curve, no turn. Just endless asphalt stretching into darkness. Dennis slowed down, unsure whether to trust his instruments or his own eyes. His truck's position on the GPS entered the hairpin curve, but he was driving straight. The GPS began to flash warnings. Rerouting, GPS signal lost. The screen went blank. Dennis's phone, mounted on a dashboard holder, also lost signal. No bars, no searching indicator, just a complete absence of connectivity. His CB radio was silent, not even static. He tried keying the microphone. Nothing happened. No transmission indicator, no sound, as if the radio had been turned off even though he could see it was powered on. The road continued straight. Dennis drove for another 10 minutes, watching the odometer tick off miles. His headlights showed nothing but highway and forest and highway repeating endlessly. No curves, no hills, no variation whatsoever. Just a perfectly straight road through uniform trees. He should have been descending the eastern side of the Cascade Range by now, dropping in elevation toward the plateau country beyond. Instead, the road remained level, the forest unchanged. The trees on either side were identical, as if the same 100-yard section was being copied and pasted over and over. Dennis tried his high beams, hoping to see further ahead. The increased illumination revealed something that made his breath catch. In the distance, maybe half a mile ahead, he could see his own tail lights. That was impossible. He was moving forward, driving at 55 miles per hour, but somehow he could see the back of his own truck ahead of him on the highway. Dennis blinked, rubbed his eyes, looked again. The taillights were still there, red and distinct, maintaining the same distance no matter how fast he drove. He accelerated to 60 miles per hour, then 65. The taillights remained exactly the same distance ahead. He slowed to 40. They stayed in the same relative position, as if he and his future self were connected by an invisible tether. Dennis felt panic rising in his chest. This wasn't fatigue or hallucination. This was real, happening, and completely impossible. He was trapped in some kind of loop, driving on a highway that shouldn't exist, chasing his own vehicle through an endless forest. He considered stopping, just pulling over and waiting to see what would happen. But something instinctual warned him against it. The forest beyond his windows looked wrong now that he was paying attention. The trees were too uniform, too perfectly spaced. They didn't move in any wind. They didn't look quite real, more like a painted backdrop or a computer-generated image. Dennis kept driving, searching for anything unusual, any break in the pattern. His fuel gauge was dropping normally, which meant he was burning diesel, using energy, moving through actual space. But where? If this was Highway 26, if the GPS wasn't working, where the hell was he? At 9:17 p.m., according to his dashboard clock, Dennis saw something different. A sign on the right side of the road. He slowed down as he approached it, trying to read the text. The sign was weathered and faded, but he could make out some of the words. Highway 26 closed for construction detour ahead 1962. That was 57 years ago. Dennis had been 4 years old in 1962, living in Chicago, nowhere near Oregon. Highway 26 existed in 1962, but it had been reconstructed and rerouted several times since then. The current version of the highway had been completed in the late 1980s. Another sign appeared, then another, all of them old vintage, displaying warnings and directions from decades past. Watch for logging trucks, chains required in winter, falling rock zone. The signs were artifacts, relics from earlier versions of the highway. And then Dennis understood. Somehow, he'd slipped onto a road that no longer existed. A version of Highway 26 from the past, from before the modern route was built. He was driving on ghost asphalt, following a path that had been torn up and replaced decades ago, but somehow still existed in some twilight space between past and present. The question was how to get off it. Dennis thought back to everything he'd done in the minutes before the highway changed. He'd been driving normally, listening to music, thinking about his delivery schedule. He'd passed where the scenic viewpoint should have been. He'd driven through where the bridge should have been. Maybe that was it. Maybe those missing landmarks were the key. Maybe he needed to find a place where the old highway and the new highway intersected, where the past and present touched. He started watching more carefully, looking for any place where the forest seemed less uniform, where the trees looked slightly different. For another 20 minutes, he saw nothing but the endless repetition. Then, ahead on the left, he spotted something. A gap in the trees. Not large, barely noticeable, but present. Dennis slowed down and turned his steering wheel slightly left, guiding his truck toward the gap. The moment his front wheels left the pavement, he felt a tremendous jolt, like driving over a cattle guard at high speed. Everything shook, the entire truck vibrating violently. Then he was on a different road. Not different in appearance, but different in feeling. The forest looked natural now, trees varied in height and spacing. The road curved gently ahead. His GPS flickered, then came back to life, showing his location with perfect accuracy. His phone reconnected, showing 3 bars of signal. The CB radio erupted with chatter, drivers talking about weather conditions near Pendleton. Dennis pulled over at the first opportunity, a genuine rest area that existed on all his maps. He sat in his cab for 30 minutes, drinking coffee with shaking hands, trying to process the experience. Other trucks came and went. None of their drivers looked like they'd just experienced anything unusual. Everything was completely normal. Except Dennis's fuel gauge. He'd burned through 3/4 of a tank, roughly 300 miles worth of diesel, to cover what should have been maybe 60 miles. And his odometer had advanced by 243 miles. He'd driven that distance on a highway that didn't exist anymore, trapped in a loop of the past, circling through ghost roads built and abandoned generations ago. Dennis completed his delivery to Spokane, then drove straight to his company's headquarters in Portland. He told his supervisor everything. The company reviewed his truck's computer logs, examining the GPS data and engine diagnostics. The logs showed continuous movement for the time period Dennis described, but the GPS coordinates were nonsensical, plotting his position in places where no roads existed, sometimes showing him inside mountains or underground. The company paid for a complete psychological evaluation. Dennis passed with no issues. No signs of fatigue-related hallucination, no cognitive problems, nothing that would explain the experience as mental breakdown. They paid for the fuel Dennis had burned. They gave him 2 weeks paid leave, and they quietly removed Highway 26 from his approved routes, assigning him to different areas without explanation. Dennis still drives, but he's more cautious now about which roads he travels. He's learned that highways have layers, histories, versions that overlap and sometimes bleed through. He's learned that the past doesn't always stay in the past, especially on roads where countless people have traveled, where the weight of all those journeys has worn thin the fabric between what was and what is. Sometimes, late at night when he's driving through mountain passes or empty desert highways, Dennis sees signs that don't match his maps. Exits that lead to places his GPS doesn't recognize. Roads that curve off into darkness his headlights can't penetrate. And he drives past them, always staying on the main highway, never taking detours, never following routes that feel wrong even if he can't articulate why. Because he knows now that some roads, once you get on them, don't let you leave. Some highways are traps, loops, prisons paved with asphalt and good intentions. And the only way to avoid them is to trust your instincts when every cell in your body screams that something is wrong, even if the road ahead looks perfectly normal. Story 6. The Radio Frequency. Thomas Reed was 36 years old when he discovered the frequency that should not exist. He'd been driving trucks for 11 years, running overnight routes through the Midwest, between Chicago and Indianapolis. Tom was the kind of driver who loved the solitude of night driving, the empty highways, and the feeling of being the only person awake in a sleeping world. On the night of February 8, 2022, Tom was hauling automotive parts from a factory outside Chicago to a distribution center in Indianapolis. The weather was cold but clear, temperatures hovering around 23 degrees Fahrenheit. Light snow covered the fields on either side of Interstate 65, creating a monochromatic landscape that looked blue-gray under the partial moon. Tom left Chicago at 11:45 p.m., planning to arrive in Indianapolis around 4:30 a.m. He had his usual setup, travel mug of coffee in the cup holder, bag of mixed nuts for snacking, and his CB radio tuned to channel 19 for company and traffic updates. The radio was quiet tonight, just occasional murmurs from distant drivers and the steady hiss of static between transmissions. Around 1:20 a.m., somewhere south of Lafayette, Tom's CB radio began to pick up interference. It started as a low buzzing underneath the normal static, almost below the threshold of hearing. Tom adjusted the squelch control, trying to eliminate the noise. The buzzing continued, gradually growing louder, developing a rhythmic quality like Morse code or some kind of data transmission. Then, cutting through the interference, a voice. Male, middle-aged, with a flat Midwestern accent that could have belonged to any of 1,000 drivers Tom had encountered over the years. But something about the voice was wrong. It had a hollow quality, like it was being broadcast from inside a metal container or through multiple layers of material. "This is Highway Ghost on Channel 19. Anyone out there? I need assistance. I need someone to hear this message." Tom keyed his microphone. "This is Rolling Thunder. I can hear you, Highway Ghost." "You're 20. What kind of assistance do you need?" Static. The buzzing grew louder, almost drowning out the voice when it came back. "I'm on Interstate 65 southbound, somewhere between Lafayette and Indianapolis. I don't know exactly. My GPS isn't working. Nothing's working properly. I need someone to confirm they can hear me." "I hear you," Tom confirmed. "Your signal's pretty weak and there's a lot of interference. What's your actual location? Can you see any mile markers?" "I've been looking. I can't find any. The road looks right, but something's wrong with it. The markers should be here, but they're not. I've been driving for hours and I'm not anywhere. Do you understand? I'm not getting anywhere." Tom felt a prickle of unease. The desperation in the voice was palpable, but the words didn't quite make sense. "What do you mean you're not getting anywhere? Are you broken down?" "No, I'm moving. 65 miles per hour, steady speed, but the highway isn't changing. Same stretch of road over and over. I passed a water tower about an hour ago, big one with Lafayette painted on it. I've passed it 7 more times since then. Every 12 minutes I pass the same water tower." Tom knew the water tower the voice was describing. He'd seen it hundreds of times, a landmark visible from the highway. He passed it himself about 20 minutes ago. He glanced in his mirrors, looking for headlights or taillights from another truck. The highway behind him was empty. The highway ahead was empty too, just his headlights cutting through darkness. "Highway Ghost, I'm also on southbound 65 and I'm not seeing any other trucks. What kind of rig are you driving? What company?" More static. When the voice returned, it sounded further away. "Blue Peterbilt, cab over design, pulling a white trailer with red stripes. Company's called Midwest Freight. We specialize in refrigerated loads. I'm hauling produce, supposed to deliver to Indianapolis by 5:00 a.m. But I can't find the city. I can't find anything except this same stretch of highway." Tom had never heard of Midwest Freight, and cab over Peterbilts hadn't been common in the U.S. for decades. Most companies had switched to conventional long-nose designs in the 90s for better safety and driver comfort. Tom was about to ask more questions when his own radio started behaving strangely. The frequency began to drift. Tom watched the digital readout on his CB radio as the numbers changed on their own, scrolling up from channel 19 to 20, then 21, then continuing past the normal CB range into frequencies that shouldn't exist on a standard radio. The display showed channel 67, then 94, then 138, numbers that made no sense. The voice came back much clearer now. "Can you still hear me? Please tell me someone can still hear me. It's been 3 nights. I've been driving for 3 nights and I can't stop. Every time I try to pull over, the steering wheel locks. The brakes don't work. I'm trapped at 65 miles per hour on a highway that doesn't end." 3 nights, Tom said. "You've been driving continuously for 3 nights." "I think so. Time isn't working right. My clock keeps resetting. It'll show 2:00 a.m., then it'll jump back to 1:00, forward to 3:00 a.m. I'm losing track. I think I might have been here longer than 3 nights. Maybe weeks, maybe years, I don't know anymore." Tom's hands were sweating despite the cold air in his cab. He turned down the volume on his radio slightly. The voice was getting so loud it was distorting. "Highway Ghost, listen to me. What's the last thing you remember before this started?" Where did you start your trip? Chicago. I started in Chicago. February 6, 2004. That was yesterday, I think, or maybe it was 18 years ago, I can't tell. The calendar in my cab says 2004, but you're using phrases I don't recognize. Your equipment sounds newer. What year is it where you are? 2022, Tom said quietly. February 8, 2022. Silence. Not static, not the buzzing interference, but complete and absolute silence. Tom checked his radio. Still on, display still showing that impossible channel number of 217. Then very quietly the voice came back. That's not possible. I left Chicago 2 nights ago. It was 2004. I was 43 years old. I had a family. I had a daughter who was 6 years old. She was learning to read. I was going to be home for her birthday on February 10th. I promised her. Tom's throat felt tight. What's your name? Your real name, not your handle. Paul Richardson. I work for Midwest Freight out of Joliet, Illinois. I've been with the company for 19 years. I'm a good driver, safe. Never had an accident, never had a violation. I don't understand what's happening to me. Tom grabbed his phone and opened a search browser. His hands shook as he typed Paul Richardson, truck driver, Joliet, Illinois, 2004. The results loaded and Tom felt his blood turn cold. There were news articles, several of them. Truck driver vanishes on Interstate 65. Missing driver's truck found empty. Family seeks answers in disappearance. Paul Richardson, age 43, had left Chicago on February 6, 2004, hauling a refrigerated load of produce to Indianapolis. He'd spoken to his wife around 1:00 a.m., called from his CB radio through a phone patch service. That was the last contact. His truck had been found at 6:30 a.m. on February 7th, parked on the shoulder of Interstate 65 near Lafayette. Engine running, lights on, cargo intact. No sign of Paul Richardson. No evidence of foul play, no blood, no struggle, nothing. The driver had simply vanished. The case had remained unsolved for 18 years. Tom's radio crackled. Are you still there? Please don't leave me alone. I've been alone long. Sometimes I see other trucks, but they're translucent like ghosts. They pass right through me. You're the first person who's heard me, the first person who's responded. I'm here, Tom said, his voice barely steady. Paul, listen to me very carefully. Something happened to you in 2004. You disappeared. Your truck was found, but you weren't in it. It's been 18 years. No, that's not right. I was just talking to my wife. I was just driving. I passed that water tower and then everything started repeating. It's only been a few hours. It has to be. Tom didn't know what to say. How do you explain to someone that they've been trapped in a time loop for nearly 2 decades? How do you tell a man that his daughter isn't 6 years old anymore, that she's now a 24-year-old woman who grew up without her father? Paul, where are you right now? Describe exactly what you see. The highway. 2 lanes southbound, 2 lanes northbound. Concrete barriers in the median. Trees on both sides, fields beyond the trees, snow on the ground. There's a green highway sign ahead that says Indianapolis 52 miles. I've passed that sign hundreds of times, maybe thousands. It never gets closer. Tom looked ahead at his own road. He saw that exact sign in his headlights passing on his right. Indianapolis 52 miles. He was occupying the same stretch of highway as Paul Richardson, but somehow they were separated by 18 years and whatever impossible physics had trapped Paul in his eternal loop. Paul, I'm going to try something. I'm going to call the police. I'm going to tell them I've made contact with you. Maybe they can help. Maybe there's something. No, the voice was desperate, panicked. Don't stop transmitting. If you stop talking to me, I'll lose you. I've been alone for so long. I can't be alone again. Please. Tom's phone showed 2:47 a.m. He had a delivery to make. His company would be expecting him in Indianapolis in less than 2 hours. But he couldn't leave this man, couldn't abandon him to his isolation. Tom made a decision. I'm not leaving, he said. I'll stay on this frequency. We'll drive together. You're not alone anymore. For the next hour and 43 minutes, Tom and Paul talked. Paul told stories about his life before the loop, about his wife Margaret and his daughter Emily. He described their house in Joliet, the way Emily laughed, the birthday party he'd been planning. Tom listened, occasionally responding, keeping the connection alive. As Tom approached Indianapolis, passing familiar landmarks and exit signs, Paul's voice began to fade. The radio frequency started drifting again, numbers on the display dropping back toward normal CB channels. Paul seemed to sense it. "You're leaving me," quietly. "You're getting away from wherever I am. I can feel you slipping away." "I don't want to leave you," Tom said, and he meant it. "Paul, I'm going to do everything I can to help. I'm going to contact your family. I'm going to tell them you're still out there somehow. I'm going to make sure people know." "Tell Emily," Paul's voice was barely audible now, breaking up in waves of static. "Tell Emily that I wanted to be there for her birthday. Tell her I tried to come home. Tell her I'm sorry." "I'll tell her," Tom promised. "I swear I'll tell her." The radio clicked back to Channel 19. Normal traffic chatter filled the speaker, drivers discussing weather and road conditions. The frequency display showed standard numbers. Paul Richardson's voice was gone. Tom delivered his load to Indianapolis in a daze, barely remembering the drive. As soon as he was unloaded, he called the Indiana State Police. He told them everything, knowing how insane it would sound. The officer who took the report was professional but clearly skeptical. "They'd look into it," he said. "They'd check the records on the Paul Richardson case." Tom also searched for Paul's family. Margaret Richardson had remarried in 2009. Emily Richardson was now Emily Chen, married, living in California, working as a software engineer. Tom found her email address through social media and sent a message. He explained what had happened, included screenshots of the search results he'd found, tried to make it sound as credible as possible. Emily responded 3 days later. She remembered her father, remembered the birthday party that never happened. She'd spent her entire life wondering what had occurred on that February night. Tom's message didn't provide answers exactly, but it provided something. Confirmation that her father hadn't chosen to leave, hadn't abandoned them. Something had taken him, trapped him, kept him from coming home. Tom never heard Paul Richardson's voice again. He drove Interstate 65 dozens of times after that night, always hoping the radio would crackle to life, always listening for that hollow voice calling for help. He tried scanning different frequencies, tried different times of night, tried replicating the exact conditions of that February night. Nothing, just normal CB chatter and static. But sometimes, when Tom passes that water tower near Lafayette, the one with Lafayette painted in faded letters, he thinks he sees something in his mirrors. A truck that looks older than it should be. A blue Peterbilt cab over with a white trailer with red stripes. It's never quite solid, never quite real, more like a reflection or a shadow. He says quietly into his CB microphone, broadcasting on Channel 19 where any driver might hear. "You're not alone, Paul. Someone knows you're out there, someone remembers." He doesn't know if Paul can hear him. He doesn't know if Paul Richardson is still trapped in his loop, endlessly approaching Indianapolis, never arriving. But Tom broadcasts the message anyway every single time, because the thought of that man driving alone through eternity is unbearable. And because Tom knows with absolute certainty that there are things on the highways that can't be explained, frequencies that shouldn't exist. Voices calling from years in the past. Drivers who never made it home and never will, trapped in the spaces between then and now, circling forever through ghost roads that exist in no atlas and on no map. Story 7. The Shadow Passenger. Linda Martinez had been driving commercial trucks for 14 years, specializing in long-distance overnight hauls across the American South. She was meticulous about her work, maintained her vehicle obsessively, and prided herself on never having been late for a delivery. On the night of August 12, 2017, Linda was hauling construction materials from Houston, Texas to Atlanta, Georgia, a 20-hour route she'd completed at least 30 times. Linda departed Houston at 9:30 p.m., her truck loaded with steel beams and construction equipment weighing 42,000 pounds. The weather forecast predicted clear skies and mild temperatures across Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. Perfect conditions for a long haul. Linda had her route planned to the minute, rest stops scheduled, fuel stops calculated. Around 2:15 a.m., somewhere in Louisiana on Interstate 10, Linda stopped at a truck stop to refuel and use the restroom. The facility was one of the larger ones, a well-lit complex with multiple fuel pumps, a convenience store, and a restaurant that stayed open 24 hours. About a dozen other trucks were parked in the lot, their drivers sleeping or taking breaks. Linda finished refueling, parked her truck, and went inside. She used the restroom, bought a coffee and a protein bar, checked her phone for messages. Standard routine, nothing unusual. The entire stop took maybe 20 minutes. When she returned to her truck, everything looked exactly as she'd left it. Doors locked, cargo secure, no signs of tampering. She climbed into the cab, started the engine, and pulled back onto the highway. That's when she noticed the smell. Not overpowering, but definitely present. Something musty, like old clothes that had been stored in a basement for too long. Linda checked her air vents, thinking maybe she'd picked up some odor from outside. The smell persisted. She dismissed it as something she'd tracked in on her boots and continued driving. Interstate 10 stretched ahead, straight and well-maintained, cutting through Louisiana swampland and pine forests. Traffic was light, just a few cars scattered across the multiple lanes. About 30 minutes after leaving the truck stop, Linda adjusted her rearview mirror and froze. There was someone in her sleeper berth. A figure barely visible in the darkness, sitting on the bed behind the curtain that separated the sleeping area from the cab. Linda's first reaction was anger. Some homeless person must have climbed into her truck while she was in the rest stop, looking for a warm place to sleep or hoping to steal something. She pulled onto the shoulder, activated her hazard lights, and turned to confront the intruder. "Get the hell out of my truck," she said loudly. "Now, before I call the police." The figure didn't move. Linda reached for the overhead light, flooding the cab with illumination. The sleeper berth was empty, completely empty. The bed was made exactly as Linda had left it that morning, her spare jacket folded neatly on the pillow, her tablet charging on the small shelf. But she'd seen someone. She was absolutely certain. A person-shaped shadow sitting on that bed, watching her. Linda stood up, leaning between the seats to examine the sleeper berth more closely. Nothing. No sign anyone had been there, no indication of disturbance. She sat back down, her heart racing. Fatigue, she told herself. Highway hypnosis. She'd been driving for several hours and the mind could play tricks in the dark. Linda drank some coffee, rolled down her window to let in fresh air, and pulled back onto the highway. For the next hour, everything was normal. Linda drove through the Louisiana night, passing occasional vehicles, listening to classic rock on the radio. The musty smell had faded, replaced by the scent of pine trees and humid air from outside. Then her truck's interior temperature dropped. Linda watched the thermometer on her dashboard display fall from 72 degrees to 65, then to 58. She could see her breath. She turned off the air conditioning, checked the controls. Everything was set correctly, but the temperature kept dropping. 52 degrees, 47. Linda put on her jacket, but the cold was unnatural, penetrating. It felt like the chill that radiates from a freezer when you open the door, or the cold of a winter night that seeps into your bones. Her fingers started going numb on the steering wheel. In her rearview mirror, she saw the figure again, clearer this time. Sitting on the sleeper berth bed, hunched forward, head tilted at an unnatural angle. The figure was dark, not quite solid, more like a concentration of shadows that roughly approximated human form. Linda didn't pull over this time. Some instinct told her that stopping would be worse, that whatever was in her truck was less dangerous while the vehicle was moving. She kept driving, eyes flicking between the road and the mirror, watching the shadow passenger. It moved. Not suddenly, but gradually, the way a person shifts position when they're uncomfortable. The head turned slightly, and although Linda couldn't see any features, no eyes or mouth or nose, she knew it was looking at her, watching her. Her CB radio began to malfunction. The speaker emitted a low, rhythmic clicking sound, almost like a heartbeat or the ticking of a clock. Linda tried changing channels. The clicking continued, consistent across all frequencies. Then, underneath the clicking, she heard breathing, slow, labored breaths that matched the rhythm of the clicks. The temperature in the cab dropped further. Linda could see frost forming on the inside of her windshield, spreading in crystalline patterns that looked almost deliberate, almost like writing. She cranked the heat to maximum, turned the defroster on full blast. The frost continued spreading. In the mirror, the shadow figure stood up. It was tall, far too tall to fit comfortably in the sleeper berth. The head touched the ceiling, or should have, but the shadow seemed to bend reality around itself. It moved forward, passing through the curtain as if the fabric didn't exist. Linda's hands locked on the steering wheel. She wanted to scream but couldn't find her voice. The shadow figure reached the back of her seat. She could feel it now, not physically but as a presence, a weight in the air, a wrongness that made her skin crawl and her stomach twist. Then it spoke, not in words exactly but directly into her mind. The voice was cold and hollow, like wind whistling through a cave. "You took something that doesn't belong to you." Linda's voice finally worked. "I didn't take anything. I don't know what you're talking about." "The coin. The silver coin you found at the truck stop." "In the bathroom. You picked it up. You put it in your pocket." Linda's blood ran cold. She'd found a coin in the restroom at the truck stop, sitting on the counter by the sink. It was old silver with a strange design she didn't recognize. Some foreign currency, she'd assumed. She picked it up without thinking, intending to give it to the clerk at the counter in case someone reported it missing. But she'd forgotten about it, had slipped it into her jacket pocket, and then put it out of her mind. "Just a coin," Linda said. "I was going to turn it in. I forgot." "It's not yours. It was left there for someone else to find, someone specific. By taking it, you disrupted the pattern. Now the coin must be returned and a price must be paid." "What price?" "I'll give the coin back. I'll mail it to the truck stop. I'll do whatever you want." The shadow figure moved closer, and Linda could feel the temperature drop even further. Ice crystals were forming on her eyelashes. Her breath came out in white clouds so thick they obscured her vision. "The price is always the same. A journey that never ends. A road that leads nowhere. You'll drive until the truck runs out of fuel, then you'll walk until your body fails. And when you can't go any further, you'll start again. You'll be trapped between places, never arriving, never resting. Forever." Linda's mind raced. The coin was in her jacket pocket, which she was wearing. She reached in, fingers numb from cold, and pulled out the silver coin. It looked innocent enough, about the size of a quarter, with a strange profile on one side and symbols she didn't recognize on the other. "Here," she said, holding it up. "Take it back. I don't want it." "Too late. You chose to take it. The choice has consequences." Linda had an idea. She rolled down her window, felt warmer air rush in from outside, and threw the coin as hard as she could. It disappeared into the darkness, lost somewhere in the Louisiana swampland. "There," she said. "It's gone. I don't have it anymore." The shadow figure recoiled, not much but noticeably. The cold in the cab lessened slightly. The clicking from the CB radio grew faster, more agitated. "You threw it away. You didn't return it. You made another choice. Choices have power. Choices create paths." The figure began to fade, becoming less distinct. Linda could see through it now, could make out the details of her sleeper berth beyond the shadow. The temperature started to rise degree by degree. The frost on the windshield began to melt. "You've created a different path," the voice said, quieter now. "Not the one intended, but every path has a price. Every choice has consequences. You'll understand, eventually." The shadow disappeared completely. The CB radio fell silent. The temperature returned to normal. Linda was alone in her cab, on Interstate 10 in Louisiana, with no evidence that anything unusual had occurred. Her dashboard clock showed 4, 11:02 a.m. Linda drove straight through to Atlanta, refusing to stop except for fuel, which she got at the busiest truck stops she could find, places with dozens of other drivers and bright lights. She delivered her load on time, then immediately drove back to the truck stop in Louisiana where she'd picked up the coin. She went into the restroom, stood at the same counter, and examined the area. Nothing unusual, just a normal truck stop bathroom, clean and well-maintained. She asked the clerk at the counter if anyone had reported losing a silver coin. The clerk looked at her strangely and said no. Linda never found the coin again, never saw the shadow figure again. But her life changed after that night in ways she couldn't explain. She started noticing patterns, synchronicities that seemed too precise to be coincidence. She'd think about calling someone, and they'd call her moments later. She'd planned to stop at a specific truck stop, and she'd arrive to find exactly what she needed, as if the universe was anticipating her choices. But there was a darker side too. Sometimes she'd see shadows in her peripheral vision, shapes that moved just beyond the edge of her sight. Sometimes she'd hear that clicking sound from her CB radio, faint but present. And sometimes, when she was driving late at night through empty stretches of highway, she'd feel a presence in her truck, not threatening exactly, but watching, waiting. Linda eventually quit long-haul trucking. She took a local driving job, delivering goods within a 50-mile radius of her home in Texas. She made sure to be off the roads by sunset. She never picked up anything she found, never took coins or objects that didn't belong to her. She learned to leave things where they were, to resist the impulse to pocket interesting finds, because she'd learned a lesson that night in Louisiana. There are rules on the highways, patterns and paths that drivers don't see, but that exist nonetheless. Some objects are placed deliberately, left for specific people to find. Taking them disrupts the pattern, creates debt that must be repaid. And sometimes the price is your freedom. Sometimes the price is an eternity of driving, trapped in a truck that never stops on a road that leads nowhere. Linda had escaped that fate through luck, or maybe through the mercy of whatever entity controlled those patterns, but she'd come terrifyingly close. Now she lives by a simple rule: if it's not yours, don't touch it. No matter how interesting it looks, no matter how valuable it might be. Because on the highways, every object has a history. And some histories come with passengers you never want to meet. Story 8. The Infinite Rest Stop. Carl Johnson was 62 years old, approaching retirement after 41 years as a professional truck driver. He'd seen everything, or so he thought, from hurricanes to blizzards, from accidents to close calls. Carl had driven over 4 million miles across all 48 contiguous states. He knew the roads like other people knew their own neighborhoods. On the night of October 31st, 2021, Halloween, Carl was making what he decided would be one of his last long-distance runs. He was hauling furniture from North Carolina to California, a 3-day trip across the southern United States. Carl had started early on October 30th, planning to drive as far as Oklahoma before stopping for a proper sleep. By 1:00 a.m. on October 31st, Carl was in eastern Texas on Interstate 20, about 2 hours east of Dallas. He'd been driving for nearly 18 hours, rotating between 4-hour driving periods and 30-minute breaks as regulations require. He was tired but functional, looking forward to the hotel bed waiting for him in Abilene. Carl saw a rest area sign indicating a stop in 2 miles. He didn't remember this particular rest area, which was unusual given how many times he'd driven this route. But rest areas were occasionally built or renovated, and Carl had been doing more regional runs lately, might have missed the construction. He pulled into the rest area at 1:17 a.m. It was larger than he'd expected, with parking for at least 50 trucks and a sizable building that housed restrooms and vending machines. The parking lot was about half full, trucks scattered across the spaces, their drivers sleeping or taking breaks. Bright overhead lights illuminated everything with that characteristic sodium vapor glow that turns the world orange and flat. Carl parked his truck, noting the space number, B17. He always noted his parking location, a habit from decades of professional driving. He grabbed his phone, wallet, and keys, then headed toward the restroom building. Inside, the facility was clean and modern, with tile floors and stainless steel fixtures. Carl used the restroom, washed his hands, then walked to the vending machines to get a snack. He selected a package of crackers and a bottle of water, paid with cash, then headed back outside. That's when he realized something was wrong. He'd entered the building through doors facing the parking lot, had walked straight to the restrooms, then to the vending machines, then back the way he'd come. A straight line, impossible to get confused. But when he exited the building, he was facing a different section of the parking lot. Not Section B where he'd parked, but Section D. Carl looked around, confused. The building behind him looked identical to the one he'd entered, same architecture, same doors. But the parking lot layout was different. He walked around the building, looking for Section B. It should have been on the opposite side. A simple matter of reorienting himself. He found Section B, but his truck wasn't there. Space B17 was occupied by a different truck, a red Kenworth that wasn't his vehicle. Carl checked the space number again. Definitely B17, but that wasn't his truck. Carl stood there for a moment, trying to understand what had happened. He couldn't have forgotten where he parked. It had been less than 10 minutes. He walked through the parking lot, checking every truck, looking for his blue Freightliner. He found 17 blue trucks, but none of them were his. Wrong model, wrong company logo, wrong license plates. 30 minutes passed. Carl walked the entire rest area 3 times, checking every vehicle. His truck simply wasn't there. He went back into the building, thinking maybe there was a separate parking area he'd missed. Maybe he'd entered a different building by mistake. But that didn't make sense. There was only one building, and he'd walked in a straight line. Inside, Carl approached the information desk. A young man, maybe mid-20s, sat behind the counter looking at his phone. Carl cleared his throat. "Excuse me, I've lost my truck. I parked it in space B17 about 40 minutes ago, and now it's not there. Is there security I can talk to? Maybe someone saw something." The young man looked up with an expression of polite confusion. "Sir, this rest area doesn't have space numbers. We use a different system, zones marked by colors." "There's no B17 here." Carl stared at him. "I saw the sign. I parked in B17. I specifically remember noting the space number." "I've worked here for 2 years," the young man said. "We've always used color zone. Red, blue, green, yellow, no numbers or letters." Carl felt a cold sensation spreading through his chest. This didn't make sense. He'd seen the space number, had made a point of remembering it. "Can you check security cameras?" "My truck is a blue Freightliner hauling a white trailer with furniture." The young man typed on his computer, then frowned. "Sir, according to our entry log, no blue Freightliner has entered this facility tonight. We track every vehicle by license plate through automated scanners. I can show you the list if you want." Carl looked at the computer screen. The young man scrolled through a list of vehicles that had entered the rest area in the past 2 hours. Dozens of trucks, multiple colors and makes. No blue Freightliner matching Carl's description. "This is impossible," Carl said. I parked. I walked into this building. I can't have imagined all of that." "Sir, I'm not suggesting you imagined anything, but maybe you're at the wrong rest area. There's another one about 30 miles west. Maybe you got confused." Carl pulled out his phone to check his location. No signal. He looked at the screen, expecting to see the searching indicator. Instead, his phone showed a full battery and what looked like normal connectivity bars. But when he tried to open maps or make a call, nothing worked. The phone appeared to function but accomplished nothing. He went back outside, determined to make sense of the situation. The parking lot looked the same as when he'd first arrived, but Carl now noticed small details that seemed wrong. The overhead lights were sodium vapor, but the quality of the light was slightly off, more orange than it should be, casting shadows that were too sharp and too deep. The other trucks in the lot looked normal from a distance, but when Carl examined them closely, the details were vague, undefined, like low-resolution images or objects seen through bad eyesight. Carl walked up to the nearest truck, a Volvo with a driver sleeping in the cab. He knocked on the window. No response. He knocked louder. The driver didn't move, didn't even twitch. Carl tried the door handle. Locked. He moved to the next truck, a Peterbilt with lights on in the cab. He could see someone moving inside. He knocked. The movement continued, but the driver didn't acknowledge him. A terrible suspicion was forming in Carl's mind. He walked to the exit of the rest area, following the signs that pointed back to the interstate. The exit lane curved away from the main parking area, lined with reflective markers and warning signs. Carl walked along it, expecting to reach the highway within a few hundred feet. The exit lane continued and continued. Carl walked for what felt like 10 minutes, following the curve of the road. The parking lot lights faded behind him, but the exit lane kept going, disappearing into darkness that his eyes couldn't penetrate. He pulled out his phone, activated the flashlight. The beam illuminated maybe 10 feet ahead, showing nothing but empty roadway extending into infinity. Carl turned and walked back. The return trip took only a minute or two, the parking lot lights appearing almost immediately. The geometry didn't work. He walked far into the darkness but returned almost instantly. He tried the entrance lane, the route he'd used to drive into the rest area. Same result. The lane extended forever into darkness, but walking back toward the parking lot took no time at all. It was as if the rest area existed in a bucket of space that was much larger on the inside than it should be. Carl went back into the building, trying to control his rising panic. The young man at the information desk was still there, still looking at his phone. Carl approached him again. "I need to use a phone, a landline. My cell isn't working properly." The young man pointed to a payphone near the restrooms. Carl hadn't seen a working payphone in years, but he walked over to it. He picked up the receiver, expecting silence or a disconnect message. Instead, he got a dial tone. He dialed 911. The phone rang and rang and rang. No answer, no operator, no recording, just endless ringing. Carl hung up and tried his wife's number. Same result. He tried his company's dispatch number, his own cell phone number, random numbers he made up. Every call rang endlessly without connecting. He returned to the information desk. "The phones aren't working. I can't reach anyone and I can't get out of this rest area. The exit lanes don't go anywhere." The young man looked up with that same expression of polite confusion. "Sir, this rest area doesn't have space numbers. We use a different system, zones marked by colors. There's no B17 here." Carl felt his stomach drop. "You just told me that 5 minutes ago, don't you remember?" "Sir, I've worked here for 2 years. We've always used color zones, no numbers or letters." It was the exact same response, word for word. The young man's expression was identical, his tone unchanged. He was repeating, looping like a recording. Carl backed away from the desk. He looked around the building, really looked, paying attention to details he'd overlooked. The other people in the building, the few he'd seen, weren't moving normally. A man at the vending machine was inserting coins, pressing buttons, but the machine never dispensed anything, and the man kept repeating the same actions. A woman near the restrooms was reading a sign, lips moving slightly, but her eyes never tracked across the text. She read the same spot over and over. Carl ran outside. He went to his original parking space, B17 in Section B. The space marker was there, clear as day, metal post with B17 stenciled in reflective paint. But the information desk worker had insisted such markers didn't exist. Carl looked at the other spaces, B16, B18, all clearly marked, but somehow invisible to the people who worked here. He walked to the edge of the parking lot where the pavement met grass and trees. The vegetation looked real from a distance, but up close, it was wrong. The grass was too uniform, every blade the same height. The trees were too symmetrical, their branches formed patterns that nature never created. And when Carl reached out to touch a tree trunk, his hand passed through it. Not through solid wood, but through something that had no substance, that existed only visually. Carl spent the next hour testing the boundaries of the rest area. He walked every lane, every path, every section of parking lot. He discovered that he could move freely within the rest area, but any attempt to leave, to reach the interstate or the surrounding landscape, failed. The exit lanes extended forever. The entrance lanes looped back on themselves. The trees and grass at the perimeter were illusions. He was trapped in a place that looked like a rest area but existed nowhere, connected to nothing, a pocket of space that should not be. Other trucks continued to arrive. Carl watched as drivers pulled in, parked, and entered the building. He tried talking to them, tried warning them. Most ignored him completely, walked past as if he didn't exist. A few responded, but their responses were generic, scripted. Just taking a break, buddy. Long night on the road. See you out there. None of them seemed to realize where they were. None of them tried to leave. They took their breaks, used the restrooms, bought snacks from the vending machines that never actually dispensed anything, then went back to their trucks and sat there, existing in a strange limbo. Carl tried everything he could think of. He attempted to break windows, to damage property, thinking maybe destroying the illusion would release him. But the windows wouldn't break, the doors wouldn't budge, and his attempts at vandalism drew no response from anyone. As dawn approached, according to Carl's watch, the sky began to light. But the light was wrong. It came from nowhere and everywhere, turning the sky a pale gray without any source, without any sun. The orange parking lot lights flickered, then went out, and the gray light took over, flat and directionless. Carl realized with growing horror that he'd been in this rest area for over 6 hours. His delivery window was closing. His company would be trying to contact him. His wife would be worried. But he had no way to communicate with the outside world, no way to leave, no way to do anything except exist in this impossible space. He sat on a curb and cried, not from physical pain or fear exactly, but from the sheer impossibility of his situation. After 41 years of careful driving, of following regulations and maintaining his vehicle and being professional, he'd ended up trapped in a place that defied every law of physics and geography he understood. That's when he noticed the other truck, his blue freight parked in space B-17 where it should have been all along. Carl stood up, walked over, looked in the window. Empty. No driver, no keys in the ignition. But definitely his truck with his company logo, his license plate, his personalized sun visor. Carl tried the door. It opened. He climbed inside, sat in the familiar driver's seat, felt the worn steering wheel under his hands. Everything was exactly as he'd left it. His coffee in the cup holder, his phone charger plugged in, his log book on the dashboard. Except for one thing. The ignition was missing. Where the key slot should have been, there was just smooth plastic, as if the ignition had never existed. Carl couldn't start the truck, couldn't turn on the electrical system, couldn't do anything except sit in a vehicle that looked perfect but was utterly non-functional. He stayed in that cab for what felt like days, though his watch insisted only hours were passing. The gray light continued, unchanging. Other trucks came and went, except they didn't actually go anywhere. They drive toward the exit, disappear into the darkness, then reappear at the entrance and park again, the drivers repeating their routines endlessly. Carl eventually understood what had happened. He'd driven into a rest area that existed between places, a location that had somehow detached from normal geography. Maybe it had always been there, a trap waiting for the right conditions. Maybe it was created by something, some force or intelligence that fed on trapped travelers. Carl would never know. What he did know was that he was going to grow old here, in this parking lot, watching the same trucks arrive and depart, listening to the same scripted conversations, living in his cab that couldn't drive anywhere. His retirement, his family, his life beyond the highways, all of it was gone, replaced by an eternal rest stop that refused to let him rest. Sometimes, on I-20 in eastern Texas, drivers report seeing a rest area that's not on any maps. It appears suddenly, well-lit and inviting with plenty of parking and modern facilities. Some drivers pull in. Most of them leave without incident. But occasionally, a truck enters that rest area and never comes back. The driver, the vehicle, the cargo, all vanish as if they never existed. And if you're ever driving through that area late at night and you see a rest area that seems too perfect, too inviting, pay attention to the space markers. If they're numbers and letters, if you see a space labeled B17, keep driving. Don't stop. Because once you park in that space, once you walk into that, you might discover that some rest areas are designed to keep you resting forever. Story 9. The Reverse Route. Elena Vasquez was a 39-year-old long-haul trucker who specialized in time-sensitive deliveries across the western United States. She had an exceptional safety record and a reputation for always delivering on schedule, no matter the weather or road conditions. On the night of May 17, 2020, Elena was hauling medical equipment from Seattle, Washington to Phoenix, Arizona, a route that would take her through Oregon, Nevada, and into Arizona over approximately 24 hours of driving. Elena departed Seattle at 8:00 p.m., her truck loaded with sophisticated diagnostic machinery worth several $100,000. The cargo was insured, temperature-controlled, and vitally important. The equipment was needed at a hospital in Phoenix by 10:00 p.m. the following evening. Elena had done this route dozens of times, knew every rest stop and truck stop, every mile of highway. The first 8 hours were completely routine. Elena drove south through Oregon, stopped for fuel near Eugene, continued through the mountains toward the Nevada border. She was making excellent time, her GPS showing she was actually ahead of schedule by about 45 minutes. Around 4:15 a.m., Elena was on Highway 95 in northern Nevada, a long stretch of empty road through desert and scrubland. The highway was nearly deserted at this hour, just occasional headlights from southbound travelers. The sky was clear, full of stars, the kind of expansive darkness that only exists far from cities. Elena noticed something odd about the mile markers. She just passed mile marker 374 heading south. But the next marker she saw read 376. She skipped 375 or missed it somehow. Elena didn't think much of it initially. Mile markers occasionally went missing, removed by vandals or knocked down by accidents. But then the next marker read 378, then 380, then 383. They were spaced too far apart and they were skipping numbers. Elena checked her GPS. It showed her position correctly, moving steadily south at 65 miles per hour. But the mile markers weren't matching the GPS coordinates. Then Elena saw mile marker 370. She'd been at 383 just minutes earlier. Now she was at 370. The numbers were backward while she drove south. Elena slowed down, unsure what was happening. She checked her compass. The needle pointed south, confirming her direction. She looked at the stars, trying to orient herself using constellations she'd learned as a child. Everything confirmed she was traveling south, moving in the correct direction. But the mile markers continued counting backward. 368, 365, 361. Elena watched them pass, her confusion turning to unease. This wasn't possible. Mile markers measured distance along a highway, increasing as you traveled in one direction, decreasing in the opposite direction. But Elena was definitely moving south and the markers should have been increasing. She tried her CB radio. Breaker 19, this is Desert Queen on Highway 95 northbound. Anyone else experiencing problems with mile markers? Come back. Static. Then a voicemail, sounding confused. "Desert Queen, this is Roadrunner. You said northbound, but I thought you said you were heading south." Alina frowned. "I am heading south. I misspoke. Southbound on 95, but the mile markers are counting backward." "Desert Queen, I'm also southbound on 95, about 40 miles north of Tanapa. Mile markers look normal to me, counting up like they should. What's your 20? Alina looked at her GPS. I'm showing mile marker 352 right now. But it should be higher. I was at 383 a few minutes ago." "Desert Queen, I just passed 352 heading south. I don't see your truck, should be right on top of you." Alina looked in her mirrors, looked ahead. No other trucks visible. Highway 95 was empty in both directions, but Roadrunner claimed to be at the same mile marker, also heading south. They should have been able to see each other. "Roadrunner, what time do you show?" 4:27 a.m. "Why?" Alina looked at her dashboard clock. It showed 4:27 a.m., same time. "Never mind, must be a GPS glitch. I'll reset my system." Alina turned off her GPS unit, waited 10 seconds, turned it back on. It took a moment to acquire satellites, then displayed her position. According to the GPS, she was now at mile marker 341, still heading south. She lost another 11 miles or gained them in reverse while her GPS reset. The sky was starting to change. Alina noticed it gradually, the darkness taking on a strange quality. The stars were still visible, but they looked different, brighter, sharper, and they were in wrong positions. Alina had driven through enough nights to know the major constellations, the way Orion dominated the winter sky, how the big rotated around Polaris. The stars above her were arranged in patterns she didn't recognize. Mile marker 330 appeared, then 325, then 318. Alina was traveling backward through space, moving south while somehow retracing her route in reverse. She passed landmarks she'd seen hours earlier, but from the opposite perspective. A distinctive rock formation, a damaged guardrail, a dead tree with white branches. Her fuel gauge wasn't decreasing. That's when Alina noticed something that made her hands go cold on the steering wheel. She'd been driving for over half an hour since noticing the backward mile markers, but her fuel gauge showed exactly the same level. Not dropping, not even slightly lower. She checked her trip odometer. The numbers were decreasing, rolling backward. She watched as the odometer ticked down from 462.7 to 462.6, subtracting miles instead of adding them. Alina was driving in reverse through time and space, her truck moving forward but somehow canceling out the distance traveled, rewinding her journey step by step. She tried to think through what this meant. If she continued, would she eventually arrive back in Seattle? Would she arrive before she'd left? What happened to causality, to linear time, if she could drive backward through her own route? The cargo. Alina suddenly thought about the medical equipment in her trailer. It was time-stamped, logged, tracked through multiple systems. If she arrived in Phoenix having traveled backward, would the timestamps show negative time? Would the cargo even exist in a coherent state? She tried calling her dispatcher. Her phone showed signal, but when she dialed, the call wouldn't connect. She tried her company's emergency line, got the same result. Her phone was functional but disconnected from normal communication networks. Mile marker 287. Alina recognized this section of highway. She passed it about 2 hours into her journey, around 10:00 p.m. the previous night. She'd been traveling south, thinking about the delivery schedule, listening to a podcast about astronomy. Now she was passing it again, moving south but somehow traveling backward through her own route. That's when she saw the other truck. Her truck, a blue Peterbilt identical to her own, driving south about a quarter mile ahead. Alina could see the running lights, the distinctive configuration of her company's trailers. She accelerated, trying to close the distance. The other truck maintained its lead. Alina sped up to 70 miles per hour, then 75. The distance between the trucks remained constant, as if they were connected by an invisible tether. Alina could see the back of the other truck clearly now. Same license plate. Same dent in the left corner of the trailer, damage from a close call with a loading dock in Portland 3 months earlier. She was looking at herself. Not a copy or a twin, but the actual truck she'd been driving hours earlier when she'd first passed this section of Highway 95. Somehow, she'd caught up to her own past, was driving alongside an earlier version of her journey. Alina tried her CB radio. Truck ahead, blue Peterbilt southbound. This is Desert Queen. Do you copy? No response. The truck ahead continued steadily, not acknowledging the transmission. Alina tried again, using different channels, different call signs. Nothing. Then her own radio crackled to life. Her own voice came through the speaker. Breaker 19, this is Desert Queen on Highway 95 southbound. Anyone else experiencing problems with mile markers? Come back. It was the transmission she'd made earlier, the one where she talked to Roadrunner. Alina was hearing her own past broadcast, replayed through the CB radio. She listened as Roadrunner responded, heard the entire conversation play out exactly as it had the first time. When the transmission ended, Alina sat in silence, trying to process the implications. She was moving backward through her own timeline, approaching the moment when she'd left Seattle. What would happen when she reached the beginning? Would she simply disappear, cease to exist, cancel herself out? Mile marker 243. Mile marker 211. The numbers counted backward, ticking down like a timer toward zero. Alina passed through Tanapa, a small town she'd driven through hours earlier. The streets were empty, the buildings dark. But as Alina watched, she saw lights beginning to appear in windows. People moving in reverse, going to bed backward, unsleeping their way through the night. Time was running backward, but only from Alina's perspective. She was traveling upstream through her own journey, watching events unspool in reverse. Mile marker 187. Alina recognized a truck stop she'd passed around midnight. She de-stopped there, taking a 15-minute break, used the restroom. On impulse, Alina pulled into the truck stop now in the early morning hours. The parking lot was empty except for one truck, her truck. The blue Peterbilt sat parked in a space near the building, cab lights on, driver invisible behind the tinted windows. Alina parked, climbed out of her own cab, walked over to the other truck. She looked in the window. She saw herself. The other Alina was sitting in the driver's seat, drinking coffee, checking her phone. The past version of herself taking a break during the midnight stop. Alina knocked on the window. The other Alina didn't react, didn't turn, didn't acknowledge the sound. Alina knocked harder. Nothing. The past version of herself continued her break, oblivious to the future version standing inches away. Alina tried the door handle. It wouldn't move. Not locked, but immovable, as if the truck and everything in it was frozen, existing in a moment that couldn't be interrupted. Alina went into the truck stop building. It was empty. No clerk at the counter, no other drivers, no signs of life. But the lights were on, the vending machines hummed, everything functioned. Alina used the restroom, the same one she'd used at midnight. When she came out, she saw wet footprints on the floor. Her own footprints from the earlier visit, still damp, evaporating backward, water molecules recombining with the tile. She went back outside. Her past self's truck was gone. The parking space was empty. Alina checked the time. It was now 11:58 p.m. according to her phone. She traveled backward from 4:27 a.m. to 11:58 p.m., losing 4.5 hours or gaining them in reverse. Alina climbed back into her truck and pulled onto the highway. Mile markers continued counting backward. 162, 141, 107. She was approaching Seattle, moving backward through her entire route. She tried to think of a way to break the cycle, to stop the backward progression. What if she pulled over and stopped moving? Would time continue running backward, or would she pause in place? What if she turned around, tried to drive north? Would she still travel backward through her route, or would the reversal reverse itself? Alina decided to try. At mile marker 93, she pulled onto the shoulder, put the truck in park, and waited. Her dashboard clock continued counting backward. 11:43 p.m. became 11:42, then 11:41. Time was progressing in reverse whether she moved or not. She put the truck in gear and executed a careful U-turn, pointing north instead of south. She accelerated, watching the mile markers. They continued counting backward. 93, 89, 84. Driving north didn't change the direction of time. She was still moving backward through her journey, approaching Seattle, approaching the moment of departure. Mile marker 47. Alina saw the Seattle city limits sign. She was almost at the warehouse where she'd loaded the cargo, back to the beginning of her route. What would happen when she arrived? Would she merge with her past self? Would she simply disappear? Would two versions of herself in her truck occupy the same space? Mile marker 15. Alina pulled into the warehouse parking lot at 8:03 p.m., 3 minutes after she departed on the original journey. Parking lot looked exactly as it had when she'd left, other trucks parked in familiar positions, the warehouse loading docks still lit. Alina climbed out of her cab. Everything felt normal. She walked to the warehouse office, opened the door. The dispatcher, a man named Frank Morrison, looked up from his desk. "Alina, I thought you left already. Problem with the truck?" Alina stared at him. "Frank, what time is it?" 8:05. "You pulled out of here about 5 minutes ago. Did something break down?" "You saw me leave 5 minutes ago." "Yeah, watched you pull out myself. Is there a problem?" Alina's mind raced. She arrived back at the warehouse after departing, but from Frank's perspective, she'd only been gone 5 minutes. The entire backward journey, the hours of reverse travel, had somehow compressed into a few minutes of normal time. "Where's my truck?" Alina asked. "The one I was driving. Where did you see it go?" Frank looked confused. "What are you talking about? You're driving your truck." "It's parked right outside." Alina went back outside. Her blue Peterbilt sat where she'd parked it moments earlier. Only one truck. No duplicate, no past version. Just her vehicle loaded with medical equipment ready to depart for Phoenix. She checked the cargo. Properly secured, temperature controls functioning, all systems normal. She checked her trip odometer. It read 462.7 miles, the exact number she'd seen when the backward progression started. Everything had reset. Alina climbed back into her cab and looked at her GPS. It showed her current location at the warehouse in Seattle. The route to Phoenix was displayed, nearly 1,300 miles of highway stretching south, as if she'd never left, as if the entire backward journey had been preparation, a preview, a warning of what not to do. Alina's phone rang. Her dispatcher. "Alina, I've got an update on your delivery. Hospital in Phoenix is pushing the deadline up. They need the equipment by 8:00 p.m. tomorrow instead of 10:00. Can you make it?" "I'll make it," Alina said quietly. She drove out of the warehouse parking lot at 8:17 p.m., taking the same route south toward Oregon and Nevada. Everything proceeded normally. Mile markers counted forward. Time moved in the proper direction. Alina delivered the medical equipment to Phoenix at 7:42 p.m. the following evening, 18 minutes ahead of the revised deadline. She never told anyone about the backward journey, but Alina drives differently now. She pays attention to mile markers with obsessive care. If they ever start counting in the wrong direction, if time ever begins to flow backward, she knows exactly what's happening. And she knows that some routes aren't meant to be traveled, that some journeys lead not forward but backward, unraveling your path, returning you to the beginning to start again, and again, and again, trapped in an eternal loop of departure and return. Story 10. The Copying Junction. Michael Torres had been driving commercial trucks for 16 years, specializing in hazardous materials transport across the northeastern United States. On January 4, 2023, Michael was hauling industrial chemicals from a manufacturing plant in New Jersey to a processing facility in upstate New York. The route was straightforward, mostly on Interstate 87, a highway Michael had driven hundreds of times. Michael departed the New Jersey facility at 7:30 p.m., his truck loaded with 3,000 gallons of industrial solvent properly contained in hazmat-certified tanks. The weather forecast predicted light snow, nothing serious, temperatures in the mid-20s, standard winter conditions for this region. Michael had his truck equipped with chains, emergency supplies, and all the required safety equipment for hazmat transport. The first 2 hours were completely routine. Michael crossed into New York, passed through the suburbs north of New York City, continued up the Hudson River Valley. Light snow was falling, just enough to require consistent windshield wipers but not enough to create dangerous conditions. Traffic was moderate, mostly other commercial vehicles and a few passenger cars. Around 9:45 p.m., Michael approached a junction where Interstate 87 split. The main highway continued north, while a connector branched off toward the east, leading to smaller state routes. Michael had passed this junction countless times, always staying on the main highway. Tonight should have been no different. As Michael approached the junction, he saw both routes ahead. The main highway curving gently to the left, staying northbound. The connector branching right. Normal, familiar. Except tonight there was a third route. In the center, between the main highway and the connector, there was another road. A split that shouldn't exist. Michael had detailed knowledge of this area, had studied maps and driven this section dozens of times. There were only 2 routes at this junction. But tonight, clearly visible in his headlights and marked with proper highway signs, there was a third option. The sign read I-87 North Alternate Route. The road surface looked identical to the main highway, properly plowed with fresh lane markings and reflective markers. It appeared to be a legitimate route, newly constructed perhaps, something Michael had somehow missed in previous trips. Michael was in the center lane, approaching the junction at 60 miles per hour. He had seconds to decide which route to take. The main highway was familiar, reliable, but traffic ahead looked heavier than usual and Michael was ahead of schedule. The alternate route might save time. He made the decision, steering toward the center path, the alternate route that shouldn't exist. His truck merged smoothly onto the road, which curved gently to the right before straightening out and continuing north. The surface was perfect, freshly paved, better than the main highway. Michael settled into the drive, watching the snow fall in his headlights. For about 10 minutes, everything seemed normal. The road ran parallel to the main highway, visible through the trees on Michael's left. He could see the lights of other vehicles on I-87, trucks and cars moving north at regular speed. Michael's alternate route was empty, no other traffic, which struck him as slightly odd but not alarming. Then Michael noticed the truck. Another semi, driving on the main highway parallel to his position, about 200 yards to his left. It looked similar to his own truck. Same make and model, same color, same trailer configuration. Michael couldn't see the details clearly through the falling snow and distance, but the resemblance was striking. The other truck maintained its position, staying exactly parallel to Michael's position. Both trucks were traveling at the same speed, covering the same distance as if synchronized. Michael watched it for a few minutes, then dismissed it as coincidence. Lots of trucks looked similar, especially at night in poor weather. But then Michael noticed the company logo. Even through the snow and darkness, he could make out the lettering on the other truck's trailer. It matched his company's logo. Same design, same placement. Michael felt a strange unease. His company operated multiple trucks, so seeing another one wasn't impossible. But having it appear on the parallel highway at exactly the same position felt uncanny. Michael reached for his CB radio. Breaker 19, this is Chemical Express. Someone else running I-87 northbound near exit 22. I'm on the alternate route. Come back. Static. Then after a few seconds, a voice. male with the same slight accent Michael had, the same vocal patterns. "This is Chemical Express on I-87 northbound Main Highway. I see a truck on the alternate route." "That you calling?" Michael's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The voice sounded exactly like him. Not similar, not close, but identical. "This is Michael Torres with Chemical Express. Who am I speaking with?" A pause. "Then this is Michael Torres with Chemical Express. What kind of joke is this?" Michael felt his chest tighten. This wasn't possible. "What cargo are you hauling?" "Industrial solvents, 3,000 gallons, hazmat certified. New Jersey to upstate New York." "Why are you asking me this?" Michael was hauling exactly that cargo on exactly that route. "What time did you depart New Jersey?" 7:30 p.m. "Are you going to tell me what this is about?" Michael had departed at 7:30 p.m. Same cargo, same route, same departure time, same voice. He was talking to himself. Somehow, impossibly, there was another version of him driving on the parallel highway. Michael looked at the other truck. It was still there, maintaining exact pace. As he watched, the other truck's brake lights flashed once. A second later, Michael's own foot touched the brake pedal, responding to traffic ahead. The same action, the same timing. "What lane are you in?" Michael asked into the CB radio. "Center lane, maintaining 60 miles per hour. You, same." "This doesn't make sense. There's only one of me. Only one truck with this cargo on this route tonight." Michael agreed, but he was looking at evidence that contradicted that logical certainty. CB radio crackled again. "I'm going to try something," the other voice said. "I'm going to flash my high beams 3 times." Michael watched the parallel truck. Its headlights flashed. 1, 2, 3, bright pulses of light visible through the falling snow. "Did you see that?" the other voice asked. "Yes," Michael said quietly. "Okay, now you try. Flash yours 3 times." Michael reached for the light control, activated his high beams in 3 short bursts. As he did this, he saw the parallel truck's lights flash. The same pattern, the same timing, both trucks flashing simultaneously. "I saw it," the other voice said. "We're synchronized. Every action I take, you're taking at the same time. Every word I say, you're saying with me." Michael realized the voice was right. They weren't having a conversation in the normal sense, weren't taking turns speaking. They were talking simultaneously, each word synchronized perfectly. Michael was both speaking and hearing himself speak, his voice coming through the CB radio at the exact moment he formed the words. "We're the same person," Michael said, and heard himself say it at the same instant. The same truck, the same moment, somehow split across 2 highways. "But which one is real?" the voice asked, and Michael felt himself asking the question simultaneously. Which highway is the original and which one is the copy? Michael had no answer. He watched the parallel highway, watched his own truck driving alongside him. The alternate route and the main highway ran side by side, separated by trees and a few hundred yards of distance, but clearly visible to each other. Then Michael noticed something that made him slow down. Ahead, maybe a mile or two, the 2 highways diverged. The main I-87 curved to the left, continuing into the mountains. The alternate route curved right, heading toward lower elevations and different terrain. The roads were separating, and soon Michael wouldn't be able to see the parallel truck anymore. "We're about to split," both versions of Michael said simultaneously. "The roads diverge ahead. What happens when we can't see each other anymore?" Both voices asked the same question at the same moment. "Do we stay separate? Does one of us disappear? How does this resolve?" Michael slowed down, considering stopping. But the alternate route had no shoulder, no place to pull over safely. The road continued forward without brakes, without exits, offering no option except to keep driving. The highways began to diverge. The main I-87 curved left. The alternate route curved right. Michael watched the parallel truck begin to separate, moving away at an angle. He could still see it, but the distance was increasing. 200 yards became 300, then 400. The CB radio transmission grew weaker, filled with static. The synchronized voice began to break up. "Still here, can you signal weaker?" "I'm losing you," Michael said. The signal's breaking up. Same problem can barely. The voice faded, replaced by static and interference. Michael watched the parallel truck disappear behind terrain and forest. One moment he could see the distant lights, the next they were gone, blocked by geography. He was alone on the alternate route, no other vehicles visible, no sign of the main highway. His CB radio went silent. Michael tried calling again, cycling through channels, searching for the other version of himself. Nothing but empty static. The connection was broken. Michael continued driving, following the alternate route through increasingly unfamiliar territory. The road's surface remained excellent, properly maintained, but the surroundings looked wrong. The trees were too uniform, the terrain too flat. Michael consulted his GPS, but it showed only the main highway, no alternate route. According to the GPS, he was still on I-87, but the road outside his window didn't match the displayed route. After 30 minutes of driving, Michael saw a junction ahead, a place where the alternate route merged back with the main highway. The two roads came together in a smooth Y shape, joining into a single northbound path. Michael guided his truck through the merge, feeling a strange sensation as his vehicle transitioned from the alternate route to the main highway. Like passing through a temperature change or moving from one room to another, a subtle shift in atmosphere. Once on the main highway, everything felt normal again. The road matched his GPS, the terrain looked familiar, and other vehicles appeared. Michael passed several trucks and cars, normal traffic for this time of night. He checked his mirrors constantly, looking for a duplicate of himself, a second truck that might have merged from the alternate route. Nothing. Just his own vehicle, single and unique. Michael reached his destination in upstate New York at 1:17 a.m., delivered his cargo without incident, and completed all his paperwork. Everything was normal. The receiving facility had no record of a duplicate delivery, no sign that two versions of Michael Torres had arrived with the same cargo. But when Michael checked his trip odometer, he found something strange. The distance logged was almost exactly double what it should have been. He traveled 214 miles according to the odometer, but the route from New Jersey to his destination was only 109 miles. Somehow, his truck had covered twice the expected distance. Michael reviewed his truck's electronic logs, the automated system that tracked his driving time and distance. The logs showed continuous driving from 7:30 p.m. to 1:17 a.m., but the GPS data was corrupted, showing two simultaneous routes. The system had recorded him on both the main highway and the alternate route at the same time, as if his truck had existed in two locations simultaneously. Michael filed a standard post-trip report, mentioning the unusual alternate route and the GPS discrepancies. His dispatcher flagged the report for investigation. A week later, Michael received a call from his company's safety department. They sent another driver to investigate the junction where Michael had encountered the alternate route. The driver found only roads at that location, the main I-87 and the connector to the east. No alternate route, no third option. The road Michael had driven on didn't exist, couldn't be found, wasn't visible to anyone except Michael on that specific night. But the electronic logs didn't lie. Something had happened. Michael's truck had been in two places at once, covering double the distance, existing as both original and copy for approximately 45 minutes. The company quietly retired Michael's truck, assigned him a different vehicle, and paid for a comprehensive psychological evaluation. Michael passed every test, showing no signs of hallucination or mental health issues. He was cleared to continue driving, with a note in his file about the unexplained incident. Michael still drives hazmat routes through the Northeast, but he approaches that junction with extreme caution now. Every time he passes the point where the alternate route appeared, he watches carefully, looking for signs of a third road. Sometimes, late at night when weather conditions are right, he thinks he sees it. A path that branches off between the main highway and the connector, leading to somewhere that shouldn't exist. He never takes it. He stays on the main highway, following the route that appears on all the maps, the road that everyone agrees is real. Because Michael learned something that night in January. Reality isn't as solid as people believe. Roads can split not just in space but in possibility, creating branches where travelers divide into multiple versions of themselves, each taking a different path, each experiencing a different journey. And sometimes those paths merge back together, collapsing the multiple versions into one. But the doubling leaves traces, extra miles on the odometer, corrupted GPS data, memories of conversations with yourself, of watching your own truck drive alongside you, of wondering which is the copy. Michael doesn't know if he's the original or the duplicate. Maybe both versions merged when the roads came together. Maybe he's a combination of two Michaels, two experiences layered on top of each other, two sets of memories existing in one consciousness. Or maybe the other version is still out there, still driving that alternate route, forever approaching the merge point but never quite reaching it, trapped in an eternal loop of highway that exists alongside the real world but never quite touches it. He'll never know. All he can do is keep driving, stay on the highway, avoid routes that don't appear on maps, and hope he took the alternate route was a one-time occurrence, an anomaly that won't repeat. But deep down, Michael suspects that the copying junction is still there, waiting for the right conditions, the right driver, the right moment. And someday, another trucker will approach that junction and see three roads where only two should exist. And they'll have to make a choice. Take the familiar route, or risk the alternate path and discover what happens when reality splits in two and you drive down both roads at once.